First puzzle. The threats are: knight takes pawn. The checks are: rook to d1, check. Knight to h3, check. Knight to e2, check. Here is the solution to the puzzle. Knight to e2, check. Rook takes knight. Rook to d1, check. Rook to e1. Rook takes rook, check. Knight to f1. Rook takes knight, checkmate. Let's continue. Threats in puzzle position are: queen takes pawn. Queen takes bishop. Knight takes pawn. Knight takes pawn, check. The checks are: queen to e8, check. Knight to e7, check. Knight takes pawn, check. The answer is: queen to e8, check. King to h7. Knight to e7. Let us go to the next puzzle. Here are the threats: queen takes pawn. Queen takes bishop, check. Queen takes pawn. The checks are: queen to d8, check. Queen takes bishop, check. The puzzle is solved using: queen takes bishop, check. King to h7. Rook to g1. Queen to c6, check. Rook to g2. Queen takes rook, check. Queen takes queen. One more. Threats in this position are: rook takes pawn. Bishop takes bishop, check. Bishop takes pawn. Rook takes bishop. Let us look at checks in puzzle position. Rook to c7, check. Rook to b5, check. Bishop takes bishop, check. Bishop to d4, check. Rook to d5, check. Rook to c3, check. Before, check. Answer to this puzzle is: rook to c3, check. Queen to c4. Before, checkmate. One more. Puzzle position vulnerabilities are: bishop takes pawn. Bishop takes knight. Queen takes pawn. Queen takes knight. There are no checks in this position. The puzzle is solved using: bishop takes knight. Rook to g6. Queen to h3. Another one. The threats are: bishop takes knight. Bishop takes pawn, check. Bishop takes pawn. The checks are: bishop takes pawn, check. Queen to d7, check. Queen to c8, check. Rook to d8, check. The puzzle is solved using: queen to d7, check. King to f8. Bishop to h6, check. Rook to g7. Queen to d8, check. Knight takes queen. Rook takes knight, checkmate. Next puzzle. The threats are: queen takes knight. Queen takes pawn. Queen takes rook. Queen takes bishop, check. Let us look at checks in puzzle position. Queen takes bishop, check. Answer to this puzzle is: d3. Pawn takes pawn. Pawn takes pawn. Rook to g1. Pawn takes bishop, check. Let us go to the next puzzle. Here are threats in puzzle position: bishop takes bishop. Queen takes pawn. Queen takes pawn, check. Rook takes pawn. Checks in puzzle position are: queen takes pawn, check. Solution to the puzzle is: bishop to h6. King to b1. Bishop takes queen. Let's see the next puzzle. Let us look at threats in puzzle position. Queen takes rook. Bishop takes rook. There are no checks in this position. Solution to the puzzle is: queen takes rook. Pawn takes queen. Bishop to d4, check. King to f1. Knight takes pawn, check. Let us go to the next puzzle. Here are threats in puzzle position. Bishop takes rook, check. Bishop takes pawn. Here are the checks. Bishop takes rook, check. Answer to this puzzle is: rook to c1. King to f2. Rook takes rook. King takes rook. Bishop takes rook. Let's see the next puzzle. Here are the threats. Knight takes pawn. Queen takes pawn. Checks in puzzle position are: knight to f6, check. The puzzle is solved using: queen to h5. h6. Queen takes knight. Pawn takes knight. Knight takes pawn. Queen takes knight. Queen takes queen. Next, puzzle position vulnerabilities are: pawn takes bishop, check. King takes rook. Checks in this position are: pawn takes bishop, check. The answer is: pawn takes bishop, check. King takes pawn. King takes rook. Let's see the next puzzle. Puzzle position vulnerabilities are: knight takes pawn. Bishop takes bishop. Rook takes pawn. The checks are knight to e5, check. Knight to h6, check. The puzzle is solved using bishop takes bishop. Rook takes bishop. Knight to e5, check. King to e7. Knight takes rook. Let us go to the next puzzle. Threats in puzzle position are rook takes pawn. Queen takes pawn. Knight takes pawn. Knight takes bishop, check. Here are the checks. Knight takes bishop, check. Solution to the puzzle is knight takes bishop, check. Queen takes knight. Bishop to g4. Let's continue. The threats are rook takes bishop. Checks in puzzle position are rook to d5, check. The puzzle is solved using e4. Knight takes pawn. Rook to e2. King to d5. Rook takes knight. Let us go to the next puzzle. Let us look at threats in puzzle position. Bishop takes pawn. Rook takes pawn, check. Rook takes bishop. Let us look at checks in puzzle position. Rook takes pawn, check. Answer to this puzzle is rook takes bishop. h5. Rook to e1. One more. Threats in puzzle position are queen takes queen. There are no checks in this position. The puzzle is solved using queen takes queen. Pawn takes queen. Rook to h8, check. King to e7. Rook takes rook. Let's continue. Let us look at threats in puzzle position. Queen takes pawn. Queen takes pawn. Rook takes pawn. The checks are bishop to h2, check. Solution to the puzzle is rook takes pawn. Queen to f5, check. Queen takes queen. Knight takes queen. Rook takes rook, check. Another puzzle. Threats in this position are queen takes knight. Pawn takes pawn. Here are checks in puzzle position. Queen to b6, check. Solution to the puzzle is pawn takes pawn. Rook to e3. Queen to h4. Rook takes pawn. Queen takes rook. Next puzzle. Puzzle position vulnerabilities are rook takes knight. Rook takes knight. Rook takes pawn. Rook takes pawn. Queen takes pawn. Queen takes knight. Let us look at checks in puzzle position. c4, check. Queen to e3, check. Here is the solution to the puzzle. Rook takes knight. Pawn takes rook. Rook to e3, check. King to c2. Rook takes queen. Let's continue. Here are threats in puzzle position. Queen takes knight, check. Bishop takes pawn, check. Let us look at checks in puzzle position. Queen to h4, check. Queen takes knight, check. Bishop takes pawn, check. The best move in puzzle position is queen to h4, check. King to e2. Queen takes knight. Queen takes pawn, check. King takes queen. Knight to g5, check. Bishop takes knight. Next puzzle. Threats in puzzle position are queen takes pawn, check. Queen takes pawn, check. Queen takes knight. Queen takes pawn. Rook takes knight. The checks are queen to d6, check. Queen to c7, check. Queen takes pawn, check. Queen takes pawn, check. Queen to d4, check. Queen to d5, check. Queen to b5, check. Knight to b6, check. Knight to c5, check. Rook to d1, check. Rook to d1, check. The best move in puzzle position is queen takes pawn, check. King to c6. Queen takes queen, check. King takes queen. Rook takes knight. Another one. Let us look at threats in puzzle position. Queen takes queen. Rook takes knight. There are no checks in this position. The answer is rook to d1. Let's continue. Here are threats in puzzle position. Knight takes pawn. Pawn takes knight. Bishop takes pawn, check. Queen takes rook, check. Queen takes pawn. Let us look at checks in puzzle position. Bishop takes pawn, check. Queen to d7, check. Queen takes rook, check. Solution to the puzzle is bishop takes pawn, check. King to b8. Queen to c1. Queen takes pawn, check. King to h1. Another one. Here are the threats. Queen takes pawn, check. Queen takes pawn, check. Rook takes pawn. Rook takes rook. Bishop takes pawn. Checks in puzzle position are: queen to g7, check. Queen to f8, check. Queen takes pawn, check. Queen takes pawn, check. The best move in puzzle position is rook takes pawn. Pawn takes rook. Rook takes pawn. Queen takes rook. Bishop takes queen, check. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe.